Good evening, everyone. The January 20th, 2022 meeting of the Roseville Independent Redistricting Commission is called to order. Clerk, will you please call roll?
Yeah.
Here.
And that's okay. Okay.
Here.
I don't think I'm really referring to that.
Hello? Here.
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 Here. I just want to confirm, does it sound like the speakers are on?
No, they're not on.
Now does it sound like the speakers are on?
Test.
Okay. Next on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Alternate Commissioner Donor, welcome back. You want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, hello and welcome. On behalf of the other commissioners and myself, thank you all for coming out tonight. We truly appreciate the comments received so far by email, by phone, and in person at the 5 previous public meetings. Your perspectives on nuances of your individual neighborhoods, the broad themes of what is important in a city council map, and feedback on the overall process will help guide us in choosing a final map. Tonight will be very much like the previous 5 public hearings. Staff will provide an overview of the draft maps and preliminary redistricting plan. We'll hear public testimony on draft maps and communities of interest. And lastly, we'll discuss the upcoming meeting schedule. Again, your public comments are very important to us. If you have spoken at previous meetings, I respectfully request that you yield to residents, particularly those who live in District 5, who may not have already spoken at a meeting. No decisions will be made tonight. If everything goes as planned, on Monday, January 24th, commissioners and the public will hear overviews about the IRC itself. We'll have live line drawings of proposed changes to maps and a review of public input to date. We'll also have a discussion about our methodology for choosing a final map and possible review periods following map selection. Then we will choose a draft final map. The agenda with this outline will be available on the city's website at least 72 hours prior to our meeting on the 24th. Just want to let you know that seating will be limited in the city council chambers. There will be some overflow seating, but we do encourage you, if you can, to watch live stream on the city's website or on YouTube channel, and also call in by phone. We have expanded phone capacity for January 24th. Before we begin with the items on tonight's agenda, we'll open it up for public comment on anything not on the agenda. Would anybody like to speak on anything that's not on the agenda? All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Behind us on the screen, we have City Attorney Joe Mandel, and he'll begin with reports and presentations, item 6.1.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Mandel from the Roseville City Attorney's Office. Before I get started, can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. Well, welcome everyone to the 6th of 6 public hearings to discuss draft maps that are being considered for final adoption by the Commission. I'm going to pull up a presentation in a moment, and it's the same presentation that I've been giving at each one of these public hearings, just to make sure that the messaging has been consistent at every one of these meetings. But before we jump in and look at everything, I want to do a quick recap of what we're discussing tonight and what redistricting criteria should be considered when we're creating and adopting a final map. So some of this may be redundant from prior meetings that we've been to, but bear with me. So I'm going to start sharing my presentation in a moment. Can everyone see that on full screen? Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first item is really why are we here? What is the purpose of the Independent Redistricting Commission? And this is language that was put in our city charter, Article 11, and this was language that was approved by voters at the November 3rd, 2020 election when they passed Measure On. This is for the creation of an Independent Redistricting Commission. And the purpose of the commission is to establish a redistricting process that's open and transparent, allows public comment on the drawing of city council district boundaries, ensures that district boundaries are drawn according to the redistricting criteria set forth in the city charter and applicable state and federal laws, and ensures that the redistricting process is conducted with integrity, fairness, and without personal or political considerations. So, in looking at drawing maps, there are certain criteria that need to be followed by the Redistricting Commission. This is language straight out of our city charter at Article 11, Section 11.09. If you wanted to see any of this language in the city charter, it's available on our website. Just look for the Roseville Municipal Code, and it's part of that at the very top. So this is language straight out of the city's charter. So again, Article 11, Section 11.09, subsection A. These are the items that the Independent Redistricting Commission shall consider when they're drawing their final map. So item number 1 is that council districts need to be substantially equal in population as required by the U.S. Constitution, and that population equality is determined based on the most recent federal decennial census. So that information that we received late in 2021 is what we use here. Item number 2 on things that the commission shall consider. Council district boundaries need to comply with the U.S. Constitution, the California Constitution, the Federal Voting Rights Act, and any other requirements of state or federal law that are applicable to charter cities. So again, those are the items that the commission must follow. These items now are other redistricting criteria that are looked at in order of priority. And so item number 1 here is we start looking at this, have some qualifier language of to the extent practical, and you'll see that throughout each one of these. But item number 1 in order of priority is to the extent practicable, council districts shall be geographically contiguous. Item number 2 is that to the extent practicable, the geographic integrity of any local neighborhood association boundaries, or local community of interest shall be respected in a manner that minimizes its division. And here we have a definition of a community of interest. So a community of interest is a population that shares common social or economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. And it's important to note here that communities of interest do not include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. Item number 3 in order of priority, again, straight out of city charter. Council district boundaries should be easily identifiable and understandable by residents, and to the extent practicable, council districts should be bounded by natural and artificial barriers, by streets, or by the boundaries of the city. Item number 4 in order of priority, where it does not conflict with the preceding criteria, council districts should be drawn to encourage geographical compactness in a manner that nearby areas of population are not bypassed in favor of more distant populations. And then item number 5 is any other commission adopted criteria that doesn't conflict with the other requirements for state or federal law. And just to note that this commission has not adopted any other criteria under this item number 5. Moving on with looking at redistricting criteria, these are the items now that the commission shall not consider when approving a final map. So subsection C, the commission shall not adopt council district boundaries for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against a political party. And item number D, the commission shall not consider a place of residence of any individual, including any incumbent or political candidate, in the creation of a map. Now I'm going to go over the 6 draft maps that have been moved forward for consideration for final adoption by the Commission. There were originally 23 maps that were submitted by the public, and at our meeting on December 20th, we narrowed it down to the 6 draft maps that we would like to move forward for further consideration, and those draft maps were renumbered to be draft map A, draft map B, draft map C. So I'm going to do a quick overview of each one of those maps now, starting with draft map A. And I just want to note, I can't see anybody in there, but I know that all of these maps are up on easels, as well as there's packets in the back with all of this information. So please grab information if needed, because I know this is a little bit difficult to see on the slide. So draft map A here, this is formerly public map number 1. This map has a total deviation of 9.5%, and this map preserves 89% of neighborhoods. Draft map B is formerly public map number 6. This map has a total deviation of 6.3%, and this map preserves 91% of the neighborhoods. This is draft map C. Draft map C is formerly public map number 8. This map has a total deviation of 4.4%, and 78% of the neighborhoods are preserved on map C. This is draft map D. Draft map D is formerly public map number 14. This map has a total deviation of 6.3% and preserves 93% of the neighborhoods. Draft map E is formerly public map number 15. This map has a total deviation of 8.3% and preserves 98% of the neighborhoods. And draft map F. This is formerly public map number 25. This map has a total deviation of 6% and preserves 98% of the neighborhoods. So those are all 6 of the draft maps. Now I want to kind of go over through some of the procedure for what we're going to be looking at for adoption of a final map. Again, this is language straight out of our city charter. This is Article 11, Section 11.10. This is again all approved by voters. Subsection A. The Commission shall file a preliminary redistricting plan and draft map with the City Clerk, along with a written statement of findings and reasons for adoption, which shall include the criteria employed in the process and a full analysis and explanation of the decisions made by the Commission. The City Clerk shall publish the preliminary redistricting plan and draft map at least 30 calendar days prior to the adoption of a final redistricting report and final map. Important to note on this slide is this is what we did at our December 20th, 2021 meeting, where we got together and narrowed down 23 maps down to the 6 that we would like to move on for further consideration. And then we had the City Clerk publish this on December 22nd, and so we've been having a 30-day review period, which is in this next slide. Again, going straight through our charter language. During the 30 calendar day period after publication, the Commission shall hold at least 5 public hearings, including 1 public hearing in each existing council district. You can see on the slide here, these are all 6 of the public hearings that we have had, and as you can see, this is number 6. I've been doing the same presentation at each one of the meetings, and so here we are, 6 of 6 tonight. And so next steps moving forward as we move into the next section of our city charter, after having heard comments from the public on the preliminary redistricting plan and draft map, the Commission shall adopt a final redistricting report and final map. A Commission-adopted final redistricting report and final map has the force and effect of law and is effective 30 calendar days after it's filed with the City Clerk and shall remain effective for the next 10 years until the next census. So important to note also is that the City Council may not rescind, supersede, or revise the district boundaries that were adopted by the Commission. So I know that there has been a lot of discussion about potentially tweaking map lines and boundaries and live line drawing, and what does that change up in the process. So we currently have a meeting scheduled for January 24th. That was originally going to be the final map adoption date, but given some of the discussion that we've been having over the most recent meetings, the meeting on January 24th may be a narrowing down meeting and not necessarily a final map adoption meeting, and we can discuss that a little bit further after I get through the final slide of my presentation. So moving on, again, just to get through the city charter language, After the final map is adopted, the city clerk shall number each council district such that for as many residents as possible, the number of the council district they reside in remains the same. And I do want to note that all of the draft maps A through F that you're seeing have already had that analysis done by our demographer to determine, basically displacing as few residents as possible given those maps. And then subsection E in the city charter to note the final redistricting report and final map shall be subject to referendum in the same manner as ordinances. And so just to conclude the presentation, if you have any questions or need any assistance about the redistricting process, please feel free to contact the city clerk's office, City Clerk Roseville at roseville.ca.us, or call us at 916-774-5200. I'm going to stop sharing my presentation and I will turn it back over to Chair Frank for any further discussion or questions.
Thank you, Joe. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners regarding Joe's presentation in item 6.1? Seeing none, we'll open up for public comment on item 6.1. Is there anybody who'd like to speak or ask questions regarding Joe's presentation? We'll go ahead and close public comment and move on to item 6.2. I just want to verify, can everybody hear Joe okay? Joe, you're up.
I can hear, I hope you can hear me okay. I can kind of hear everyone okay. So are we moving on to the next item?
There's a question.
Yes.
Okay, so is that something that you'll be explaining in this agenda item, or is it something that, I think when we talk about the draft maps and community of interest, we will talk about total deviation and what that means. Just not to keep you in too much suspense. Basically, some maps or some districts have a little bit more population and some districts have a little bit less population. The deviation between the highest district population and the lowest can't be more than 10%. So that way they're not so out of whack. All right, Joe? Joe, we'll go ahead and go on to item 6.2. Joe, we'll go on to item 6.2.
Are we moving on to my next item? I'm sorry.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So this agenda item is really just a follow-up on my last item where I presented draft maps A through F. And this is an opportunity for the public to be able to provide any sort of comments or testimony that they would like to provide. We do have papers in the back regarding community of interests, and so it's a blue and white form. It's available on our website and also available at the back table. And I wanted to just go over some of the questions that the Commission is interested in hearing from the public on with regard to this. So one of the questions on this form is, which draft map do you think best serves the interests of the residents of the City of Roseville? And then please describe what you like or do not like about the draft map that you selected above. So that's the general question about which is your favorite map, or provide some information about the map. And then there is some further language about communities of interest. So what is a community of interest? A community of interest is a group of people in the same geographically definable area who share common social or economic interests. And on the form, some of the examples of communities of interest are explained as senior citizens, college students near a campus, people who live downtown or in a neighborhood, residents who share a common language, and people that use the same transportation system. So if you do have comments about a community of interest, the Commission would love to hear about it. And so some of the questions are, please document your community of interest. What are the common interests in your community? Please describe how they're important. Explain the geographical location of your community of interest. And what are the physical boundaries? What's in the redistricting process? And please describe how the redistricting process could have an impact on your community. So if anyone from the public has any information that they would like to share with the Commission tonight, this would be the item that you can do that, or to talk about any of the other draft maps. And at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Chair Frank for further questions.
Thanks again, Joe. And also, if anybody, because I know there can be sometimes glitches with the presentation, if you want anything repeated, I know sometimes I can move rather quickly through the agenda items, so if you need me to go back and review something, I'm happy to do that as well. But in the meantime, are there any commissioner questions or comments regarding Joe's presentation? Seeing none, we'll open it to public comment. Anybody who'd like to speak on this agenda item is welcome to come up to the microphone. Please state your name for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Pete Constant. I'm a resident of District 5 and very happy that you've made it over to our district. I was the vice chairman of the Charter Review Commission that was charged with putting this measure together. I particularly helped craft the language and wrote the ballot argument for the charter section that was distributed out to the voters. I'm also engaged in other boards and commissions like the Board of Appeals and a former member of CPAC. Also, I'm a professor of public policy and the director of the Institute for Public Policy at William Jessup University. I appreciate everything that the commission has been doing in fulfilling its charge under the city charter. The one item that I want to focus on is sort of one of the areas that hasn't been talked a lot about. I know there's been a lot of emphasis on communities of interest. But as the city attorney mentioned, the charter sets out not only the criteria, but a priority for criteria. And one of the initial criteria is the geographic contiguous nature of the district. And what's important there is it says, first of all, the language is very precise and it uses the word practicable, which is not the same as practical. And I know a lot of people get that confused, but practicable means feasible or capable of being done. And this is a term that's commonly used in legislative language to indicate how or if something should be done. Now, in the first section, when it talks about the geographic contiguousness, there's an additional sentence that is not in AB 849 or some of the language in other independent redistricting commissions, and that states that areas that are separated by a rail yard or a highway are not contiguous. And that was specifically discussed at the Charter Review Commission because we have this 840, 850 acre rail yard that separates our city. And for those of you who've tried to get from one side to the other, you know that that can be an impediment going back and forth even in a car, but even more so of an impediment for a neighborhood to get together and do things. Now, as you go down, that is the top priority. The second priority is the communities of interest, and I know there's been a lot of emphasis in trying to preserve neighborhood associations, which I'm wholeheartedly behind, but it's important to note that it says that to minimize the division of, not to keep them all intact, just to minimize the division of. So when you look at the maps that you have and you go through the priority as outlined in the charter, there's really only two maps that honor the charter language, the first highest priority charter language of contiguousness in relation to the rail yard. That's map C and map E. And I think it's very important that you take the time to review that language when you review the maps and make your final determination, because it's not an optional act. And in order to present findings to adopt the map, you have to provide findings that it was neither feasible nor were you capable of creating a map that did not separate residents on both sides of a rail yard in one district. It's not optional, it's mandatory. So I think that, I hope that you take some time to really think about that and look at that, because it was an intentional act of the Charter Review Commission to add that language in. I know it was intentional because I'm the one who suggested that it goes in there because I felt strongly about it. I think now when you look at all the maps, personally I like map C. I drew map C, so there's a little bit of self-interest in there. But I did that because I tried to follow the charter language as precisely as it was written. Map C has the lowest deviation of all of the maps. And most importantly, it has the best split of the future growth areas of Roseville, splitting it between two districts. Now, there are other maps that do that. I think one other map that does it. But when you look at that split on the western end of Roseville, which we're lucky enough to be out enjoying tonight, that split is not really where the growth areas are. And I was very intentional in drawing the boundaries of this map so that that line delineating between those two districts separated the two largest growth areas. We can look at what happened from 10 years ago to now, how the deviation went from, well, we don't know because they didn't have district maps, but we know that when they drew the maps based on the old data, the deviation was less than 10%. But as soon as the new data came out, it was over 69%. You can expect to see the same thing in the future because we're growing by leaps and bounds. So I think it is of critical importance to the residents of the district out here in the west side, the residents of the city, to maintain the one person, one vote rule, that you split those growth areas into two districts. So those are my comments. I hope that you take them into consideration, particularly that charter language that hasn't really been discussed. I'm just going to ask you to give some extra thought to that because I think it's critical to you making findings that the map meets the charter criteria. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any member of the public who'd like to speak on item 6.2? Welcome to come forward. State your name, please.
Yeah, hi, thank you again. Jay Reed, nice to see you all. Commend you again on the good work that you're doing. I guess I want to pay a particular note to Commissioner Sweeney. And I think it was back in October you introduced this communities of interest form that you wanted people to fill out. Like it was online and you were an advocate of that. And I think that's really, I think that form is a really good tool for you guys. And if we go through that form, with all the forms that have been submitted, one of the things that sticks out to me is how many people have advocated for map B on that form. So I think that the community feedback that this commission has solicited is really important in your process and how you decide how to move forward. And I commend you on that because it really is. Again, I advocate for map C. Map B is a backup. I think those are two good maps. I think the map A deviation is way too high, and I don't think that maps D, E, and F are easily identifiable and understandable to the regular voter out there. I don't. I think there's too many peninsulas, and I think that there's too many little segues between one district walking through another district back into the same district. I don't think that's good. And if you look at Crescent Drive on some of those maps, across the street is District 3, and right across the street is District 2. Now that occurs in some other maps too, but I think that the community feedback that you've sought, that you've really solicited from the community has been overwhelmingly in favor of map B. And I think that this body has an obligation to listen to it because that's why you were created by the voters in Roseville, to do something different than what happened 10 years ago, which no one liked, obviously, okay? So I also have, that, I don't have it in front of me, but that voter data analysis, and I call it the delay of voter participation analysis. I would very much, I know it's probably a little bit too late and I should have asked for it earlier, I don't think it breaks down the minority breakdowns of those voters that are going to be delayed in some of those maps D, E, and F. And I think that's a really important analysis that you guys should be asking for. There's a huge push going on in our nation's capital right now to make sure that voter participation is at its all-time high across all ethnic backgrounds, all racial backgrounds. And I think that before you just easily dismiss hey, this just happens in the process, you really should be looking at who it impacts the most, because that's really important, especially in a inclusive community like Roseville. Thank you.
Thank you. Like to step forward, please. Welcome tonight.
Thank you. Good evening. My name's Susan Duane, and I live in the Quail Glen neighborhood. I'm here tonight in support of keeping my Roseville community neighborhood together when developing the redistricting maps. I'm here to urge you to consider map B. My family has been a resident of Roseville within the Quail Glen neighborhood for 21 years. We've raised 3 children here in this community, and I've served on the Roseville City School District Board. The Roseville community and schools have meant a great deal to my family, and I can tell you with my own personal experience how drawing lines through a master plan community isn't in the best interest of a neighborhood. Because of the uniquely small pocket that our home resides in, our children were raised through the RCSD schools up through 8th grade, and then only a fraction of our elementary school was shipped over to Wood Creek High School out of 11,000 students in RCSD. Okay? Everybody else is slated to go elsewhere. Wood Creek High School was predominantly funneled through Dry Creek District, okay? Not the RCSD students. The children in my neighborhood are diverted from continuing on into high school with their peer group at a pivotal time in their life. What could have been avoided years ago would have been for that planning committee who drew those lines to have considered keeping neighborhood communities together so that the children could essentially grow up from preschool to high school together. And similar to what you're deciding on with the redistricting boundaries, it's best to keep neighborhoods together, the communities intact. The members of various neighborhoods share many common interests. Map B makes sense and keeps our neighborhood community together. And I appreciate your time serving on this committee, and I hope that you can understand my perspective based on my family's experience in the city of Roseville. Thank you.
Thank you. Would like to be next? Come on up. State your name, please.
Hi, I'm Melissa G. Thanks for serving on the commission and all the work that you've put in thus far. I am a 20-year Roseville resident. I work in Roseville. I have a child that has been attending Roseville schools, and I've been volunteering ever since I've lived in this town. Also, like the prior speaker, I also have a child who became in the Roseville City School District, moved around because of the high school boundaries of where we live. So therefore, I feel like that schools are a community of interest because of the social aspect. And so therefore, social is a community of interest. And I know that that's been a discussion at your meetings before, that schools were not necessarily part of a community, but I do feel that children growing up in the area should be part of that community. And so I'm speaking to you tonight as in support of also Map B. I'm a resident of the Blue Oaks neighborhood, and I would become one of the displaced voters that wouldn't be able to vote for 6 years. And so I feel that my right to vote has been taken away from me if that were to happen. I feel that Map B provides the most continuity of our communities, and I realize that your commission may make some tweaks in your next meeting, but just based on the public comments, I hope that you keep the Blue Oaks neighborhood together. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to West Roseville. My name is Jeff Short. I live in the northwest portion of the West Park Neighborhood Association. The park sometimes described as half a crop circle, but our Facebook group is Brookstone Loop at West Park. I've been following this process closely, and thank you to the city for making these accessible for those of us who couldn't be at every meeting, even if it's just by audio only. And my neighbors and I agree, Map B, as in boy, is the clear best option. We are a unique part of Roseville that has important concerns specific to our areas that this map best addresses. First, we have very different transportation needs out here than most of the rest of the city. While I-80 is the lifeblood for much of Roseville, it is rarely the best option for those of us in the far west to get to Sacramento or the Bay Area. However, the roads we need are not yet ready for us all. We need the expansion of Baseline Road and the development of Placer Parkway to get to downtown, the airport, or the Bay Area. The extension of Westbrook Boulevard is also critical, as this will get us down to Baseline much quicker. I cannot wait. These roads and our need for their expansion is a key community of interest and a necessary focus item for our representative on the City Council, our future representative. Another unique feature of West Roseville is that we are the portion of the city with the most families with young children, and as such, we use many of the family and kids-oriented large parks and recreation options more than other areas of the city. When my son plays in Little League, we go down to the Wood Creek Little League fields. When my daughter wants to go to the library, we go to Martha Riley. With rare exception, when they play sports or we're doing a city event, they're very often at Martha Riley or at Mahaney Park. It is critical that these key amenities are not divided from their main users on the west part of town, and only Map B does this. Finally, and again, uniquely in Roseville, we have a desperate need for more commercial development. While the rest of the city benefits from some of the best shopping in the nation, it takes us 10 minutes to get to a grocery store. Longer for those of us who drive the speed limit on Pleasant Grove. Map B is the map that best groups those neighborhoods like mine that needs representatives who are motivated to reach out to the business community and encourage them to build their next door out here. We love Kitchen 747 and Mojo's. We need more of that. It's my sincere hope that when I speak to this committee again in 2032, and I'm sure you'll all be here too, that I'm asking for a very different district. These communities want these needs met, but for right now and for the next decade, we need council members who identify with our needs, who understand how urgent they are, and who can articulate that to the rest of the city. Thank you, and please consider adopting Map B so that those of us in the far west don't lose our voice in city government. Thank you.
Thank you. Would like to be next and speak to this agenda item? Please state your name, please.
Shisha Rakuchi, a lifelong resident of Roseville. I'm not here to advocate for one map or another tonight. I've done that in my previous memos, so you know where I stand, and I actually support some of the speakers before me. I'm here to mainly talk about process, and I want to also compliment Joe and the city attorney staff about consistent messaging. I think Joe must have been reading some, because every one of them, I think, he didn't skip one word from the charter, and I appreciate that. But the charter is very specific, and also Joe's been very specific about your process. And the process is, on the 20th of December, you accepted or moved forward with 6 maps. 23 maps were all met the population requirements, evidently. I think 3 or 4 were discarded because of that. So now we have 6 maps. Joe said that, at least at the previous meeting, he didn't mention it tonight, but on the 24th, you will look at the different maps, and if you, hopefully you can decide on one, and if you decide to make small tweaks on one, it probably would have to go for a 6-day review according to state law. If you really did a wholesale change or combine a bunch of maps, then it would have to be a whole 30-day process. Part of my memo, and I'm not going to repeat it, I pretty much stated what's in it, but part of it is an attachment is that we haven't talked about the process of evaluation of the maps. I'm an electrical engineer, so I like to talk about process, and I've been in a lot of interview committees, a lot of projects. In your package, I provide a very simple chart. It's got the 6 maps across the top, the priorities down the left. I would start, like Joe mentioned, the geographical. I gave that 10 points. The next deal about communities of interest, they gave that 8 points because it's lower on the totem pole, you might say. Then the next 2, I put 6 and 6. I did include another category at the bottom with this disenfranchised people. We had some issues with the word disenfranchised, so I took it upon myself today to go to the internet, and I assume everyone likes the internet. So it says on the thesaurus, the synonyms or near synonyms for disenfranchised mean disabled, disempowerment, disqualify, discertify, disallow, forbid, prescribe, delegitimize, invalidate, nullify. It also says in another location, deprive someone of the right to vote, deprive someone of a right of, or privilege, deprive someone of the rights and privileges of a free inhabitant of a borough, city, or county. But this last one summarized it up. It was on a different one that says, to take away the power or opportunity, especially the right to vote from a person or group. So while you haven't accepted that as your condition number 5, as one of your criteria, I put it down beyond 4 as another 6. Now, if you want to not use that bar, that's fine and dandy. But I think it's important, and we've heard comments before. So hopefully tonight you just take testimony. You don't redesign maps tonight like we tried to do a couple of meetings ago, which I think is completely outside the process. You take testimony, ask if you have a question of me, I think that's fair game. And then on Monday, you use some kind of criteria, not just I like this map. I mean, we all like our neighborhoods. But I got to tell you that it doesn't matter what map is accepted for me. I live off of Herbert Street. I'm in all 26 maps, I'm in B, or in District 2. So that's not an issue with me or my family. It might be with some other people the way the maps are drawn, but I think that the disenfranchising the least number of voters, if all the other criteria are met, or at least minimized, I think, again, my first memo, I think, geez, at the 31st of December said, look at the big picture. No map is perfect. You got to use those criteria and put some kind of numbers on them and see how it boils out, and then maybe adjust them a little bit for your own use and you're at home this weekend, and then come up with a number that you feel and a recommendation you can make. Are there any questions? I'm sorry to come up here again today. No, I guess I'm not sorry. Here I am. But thank you so much for your patience.
Welcome tonight. If you'd like to provide your name for the record, please.
My name is Lauren Cook. I live in Fittyman Farm. I've lived here for 15 years. 12 of those years I've been president of the Fittyman Farm and or West Park Neighborhood Association. As some of you may know, this is part of the West Plan out here. There are really two neighborhoods. There's West Park and there's Fittyman Farm. And it's not farms, it's farm. But the important thing is that these are the two largest neighborhoods in the city. It's over 6,000 homes. The next smallest neighborhood is 1/3 the size of Fittyman, and also would be 1/3 the size of West Park. Currently, the two neighborhoods meet together because we have common interests. We have roads, we have stop signs that need to be put in, we have school issues, you name it. There's a lot of newness going on here. We have construction issues. As an example, there's a school over here. For those of you who don't know, there are homes on the other side of the power plant. There's also an elementary school there. 2 years ago, there was a medical call there, a 911 call for a student. It took the fire department, which is at Station 9 on Fittyman and Hayden, took them 12 minutes to get there. 3 times the time it takes to get anywhere else in the city. At that time, we petitioned the city to extend Blue Oaks, to cut that time down, to do something that was planned for future development, but to do it now because of emergency needs. We worked with our city councilman to help push that through. It happened. Today, if a fire department gets a call at that same school, they get there in 3 minutes. And that's to me the importance of why you need to keep neighborhoods together, and why it's important that you look at West Park and Fittyman as the two largest and probably fastest growing neighborhoods in the short term. Maybe not in the next 10 years, but certainly very close. And I like all the maps. I have problems with certain of the maps that split up Fittyman and or West Park. Map B, for instance, takes out a shopping center, takes out a corner of Fittyman Farm neighborhood, that takes out the first shopping center the only shopping center we have, that's going to be a Rayleigh's. And we've waited 15 years for that. And, also displaces the people in the apartments that are actually named Harvest at Fittyman Farm, and puts them, pretty much in a different neighborhood. So what I'm trying to say is that if you keep this together, we can have consistency, we can get people together to cause action, to fix whatever needs to be fixed. Another example, when I moved into my neighborhood, guess what? I thought it was a little dark, but I thought that was because it was new out here. No, there were 19 streetlights missing in my neighborhood alone. So you look at things like this, and there was no hassle. You work with the city, you come to them with a common issue, excuse me, that works. And so if you look at it, I think the goal that we have, I think, is to keep at least our neighborhoods together, because we have a lot of growth issues, and they continue, whether it be traffic, construction, all of the above. Those are my thoughts, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public would like to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment on item 6.2. and begin with item 6.3 with Joe Mandel. Joe, do you mind introducing oh, would you like to speak? Sure, come on up. So we're still on item 6.2. I will reopen public comment. You can state your name, please.
My name is Rana Gadban, and I'm the new CEO for the Roseville Area Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here representing the Chamber first, and then I'd love to weigh in as a new resident to the city. Dear Chairperson Frank and Commissioners, the Roseville Area Chamber of Commerce appreciates the opportunity to participate in the 2022 redistricting effort and extends our appreciation to the Commission members for their time and service to this worthy effort. Your participation continues a long tradition of Roseville's resident putting community first. The Chamber represents businesses, big and small, who have chosen Roseville for many reasons that represent a community of interest which permeates every part of Roseville. A safe and healthy, fiscally sound, well-planned community with low-cost utilities and a culture of innovation and creativity. Nearly 113 years ago, it was business leaders that came together to incorporate Roseville. For the business owners here today, and for those businesses that will choose Roseville in the future, these principal factors are important to the success of their business and the overall business environment and the employees they employ. The Chamber has reviewed and considered the 6 maps that the Commission and the community has before them. As your redistricting consultants have shared with you, communities of interest include groups that share social and economic similarities. That is exactly what makes the Chamber members a community of interest. We have evaluated how each map supports our community of interest and recommend that the Commission adopt Map B as a best map to serve the diverse interests of business owners, many of whom call Roseville home, just like its residents. Of all the maps under consideration, Map B provides the most consistent and stable governance for the whole community. In evaluating these maps, we recall the concerns raised by some in the community regarding how the current districts were drawn. Map B addresses much of the critique of the current districts. From the materials provided to us at the community meetings, it appears that Map B is the least disruptive to the community. Map B meets the City Charter redistricting criteria in that the districts are geographically contiguous to the extent practical. Map B maintains the geographic integrity of the neighborhood association with more than 90% of the neighborhoods included in a single district. Maps with a higher percentage of neighborhood associations in a single district also come at a high price to residents in having a say in the representation. Whereas Map B will cause 7,000 residents to be disenfranchised for 6 years, other maps have this impact on more than 28,000 residents, nearly 20% of the city's population. The district boundaries of Map B are easily definable and in many cases follow similar lines to city planning areas that are also communities of interest. Finally, the districts of Map B are geographically compact. We appreciate the task before you today, but encourage you to consider how Roseville has achieved what it has been able to accomplish in its more than 110 years. It was through the vision of its leaders and the stability and the certainty that good government and strong leadership brings to business and residents alike. Map B keeps Roseville on the path of progress and leadership in our region. And what I'd like to add to that is my personal experience. I've lived in LA for the past 20 years. I'm someone who recently decided to move to Roseville. I decided to move to Roseville because of the quality of life that we enjoy and appreciate here every single day. And I'm going to echo the comments that were made by the 2 moms that spoke before me, to say as a mother of 2, I think it's very important that we take our children's interests into account and ensure that they graduate from high school with the same children they've gone to school with since elementary. So for that reason, I also echo the sentiment of the 2 mothers that spoke in favor of Map B and ask you to take that into account. So thank you so much for your time and consideration tonight. And I hope that whichever map we choose is the best map for Roseville. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Anybody who would like to speak? Anyone else on item 6.2? I will close public comment, and I really need it this time. We'll move on to item 6.3, upcoming redistricting meeting schedule. Joe?
Okay, again, hi everyone. And this goes through the slide that I showed earlier about how we are on the 6th of 6 public hearings at this point. So kind of just to talk about the calendar and what we've been looking at. December 20th is the meeting that we narrowed down from the 23 public maps down to 6 draft maps. And looking back at that charter language again, it said that the commission will put forward a draft map. And we sort of interpreted that at the time as that's not limiting you to one map to be pushed forward for a draft map. So we moved forward 6 draft maps after that December 20th meeting, and we've been having the 30-day public comment period where we have had these 6 public hearings. So now looking forward, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be having another meeting on Monday, January 24th in the council chambers. That is a meeting that's open and available to the public. We don't know how many people to anticipate at the meeting, so I want to let everyone know that we do allow the remote telephonic public comment option for that meeting if people want to call in rather than being there in person. Fingers crossed, all of us will be there in person on Monday, and we certainly encourage you to come and comment, but if you would like to stay home and provide comments by phone, that works as well. Because on Monday the 24th, what we had originally thought might be a final map adoption date, as we've been talking about how these draft maps may not be 100% final of what we want to approve as a commission, we need to talk about what's going to happen on Monday, January 24th. And so part of that agenda on Monday, January 24th is going to be a big, long discussion about the process of how we want to move forward, how we want to finalize our process, and all of that will be open and available for public discussion. At this point right now, the agenda for the Monday meeting is not drafted because we are waiting to see what happens at this meeting to then turn around and publish the agenda for the Monday meeting, which will be published tomorrow. So just as an FYI, that will be up on the website, but it's going to be really what we're going to be talking about at that Monday, the 24th meeting is going through all of the public testimony, everything that we've received, talking about, which maps do we want to have further discussion about? Do we want to talk about tweaking any of that? How is the voting process going to work? All of that process and procedure and some of those items that were brought up by Mr. Rakucci in his comment, those are the items that we intend to flush out on the meeting before we even get to a substantive discussion about the maps. And so the reason why we're not having that discussion here at these public hearings is because these are exactly that. We're trying to present the same information at each one of these public hearings such that then when we go to the meeting on the 24th, we've given the same information to everybody. We've accepted and received the public comment that has come in. And so now we're ready to sort of move along and get toward a final map. So on that night of the 24th, we will also have to move forward with sort of a decision that we've been talking about what is a tweak, how do we handle that, what's a minor tweak, and that's something for the commission that they're going to have to decide. And my staff report is going to sort of walk everyone through an analysis or some ideas or just some suggestions of things that should be discussed to figure out what are we going to do if we're going to tweak these maps, because I think we're going to have to also meet on Monday, January 31st. And so that is a date that we sort of have penciled in on our calendars. And so I envision the meeting on Monday, the 24th, being a narrow it down, talk about moving boundaries and lines, if we're going to do that, to get to a point where we have I'm going to call it a proposed final map. But we are not going to adopt a map on Monday, the 24th necessarily, because if we're going to make some changes and edits, this is where we talked about, it's the city attorney's office recommendation that even though we don't have language in our city charter about this, we're looking at analogous state law, and if anybody's taking notes, this is California Elections Code 21628, subdivision D1, And really what that says is you're going to publish a draft map on your website at least 7 days before you adopt it as a final map. So on the 24th, if we're talking about any sorts of changes and line drawings, it's our recommendation to publish that another 7 days before we would do a final adoption, which would then make the meeting on Monday, January 31st, be a final adoption of the proposed map that was created on the 24th. And then the meeting on the 31st is really just it's the final adoption, it's the approval of the resolution adopting the map, as well as a debrief of everything that we've gone through in this process and general suggestions for next time we do this in 10 years, and any suggestions that we have for Charter Review Commission for edits to the city charter, because again, we're limited by the language that was approved by the voters, and I showed you all of that language that we have in our city charter. So as we've gone through this process, we certainly know there are some things that we can add in there that would clarify it for next time, and that would be part of the discussion that we would have on the 31st. So with that, that's kind of the background and discussion on future meetings, of what's coming up, and I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Frank, if you have any questions.
Thank you. So we'll open it up to commissioners who may have some questions or comments for Joe on this item. If you don't mind raising your hand or shouting out. Yes.
In the last meeting, you sort of mentioned submitting motions in advance, and I don't know whether you were just kind of spitballing or whatever. Is there, I mean...
Are you asking me?
Well, it just seems like, didn't that come up?
Well, what I said is, if you think you might make a motion, it would be helpful to staff if we had it written down.
Okay.
And so they can properly catalog what the motion was. Sometimes motions can be very brief, sometimes they can be long. So if you have something that you think you might, but not necessarily submit it before.
Okay. No, I love the idea, but I want to be careful that we don't break any rules.
I don't think you can submit a motion ahead of time. You can prepare it, but it's not been without an agenda item. Nothing's been agendized at this meeting.
Okay. Well, for example, tweaks. Should we submit those in the form of a motion?
So
just so the staff would be ready.
So some of the tweaks that we've heard by absorbing what folks at these public hearings have said, some have been submitted by members of the commission, including myself and Julia, and by members of the public, to the city clerk and to the demographer and the city attorneys. Those either have been or will be on the city website and also provided in the back at the last meeting and this meeting, depending on when they were submitted. The demographer is kind of holding off in doing any analysis on those changes until the 24th because we don't know if we have all of them yet. And so on the 24th, we can't expect that the demographer will be there. He will do an overview of not just the 6 draft maps, but the 6 draft maps that may have had any suggested changes submitted. And then, but that'll be an overview. And then we'll move a couple agenda items later where we'll make a motion, or anyone can make a motion, or you don't have to make a motion. You know, that's up to the commissioners. But if someone makes a motion that they would like to consider a map with changes, then we may bring the demographer back up and kind of show us what those changes look like again, so we're sure what we're voting on, and then we either vote for those changes or we don't vote for those changes. So yeah, what I meant before is like when I said, be prepared to make a motion. If you like, you don't have to make a motion, but be prepared, and but they certainly don't have to be submitted in advance. Thanks, Kevin. Any other questions?
Just quickly, have we been discarded one of the 3 options that we were offered on the meeting of the 15th where we would adopt the map as is? The language that they used tonight and in the last couple of meetings seems to lean towards the restriction is used pretty generously, and any tweak to any map is a new map that we got in our last meeting. So I just want to confirm that of the 3 choices we were given, Census, that we're no longer contemplating option 1, which is to adopt a map as it sits today.
I think that adopting a map as it sits today is still an option. option for a motion. If anybody would like to make a motion.
If I can jump in there, I think I caught everything that was being asked. If the three options are still available, and so that is something that we would have for a procedural discussion on the 24th is exactly that. Before we start talking about tweaks or doing anything like that, certainly we have to get to the consensus on, are we approving one of the maps as is? I think what I'm hearing, from a lot of these discussions is we are not, but, to move that forward. So what our recommendations, to go over what Jefferson was saying about the three options, what we talked about at prior meetings are, if the commission is interested in approving one of the draft maps A through F as is with no changes, then we had talked about, that January 24th meeting could be a final adoption meeting. I can tell you that our office will not have the resolutions and everything prepared at that point, but if you wanted to approve a final map, we would essentially just direct staff to come back at a meeting on the 31st to approve one of those maps. So that's kind of option number one. I'm going to call it approve a map as is published and sitting in front of you right now in the room. Option two is if you are going to take one of the draft maps and make some tweaks to it, define that however you want to, minor tweak, major tweak, whatever. Our recommendation in the attorney's office is if you're going to make a minor tweak of any of the existing maps that has been published, it's our recommendation under California Elections Code 21628 that we should publish that new map that would be created on the 24th, publish that for 7 days on the city's website before coming back on January 31st for a final map adoption hearing. Option number three is if we get to a point on the 24th where we draw a map that has tweaks on it from one of the original drafted maps, and the commission determines that those tweaks, I'm going to call them material tweaks or major tweaks, whatever you want to call them, substantive tweaks, if they are so substantively different than the original maps, then it's our recommendation that those maps be published for yet another 30 days prior to any sort of final adoption by the commission, and then we would have further discussion on whether or not we think additional public hearings would be required to receive more community input on those draft maps. So that is just a further clarification of sort of the three options that we're looking at moving forward for Monday, January 24th, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any questions about that.
Does that answer the question?
It does.
So I have a question. So it sounds like either any way we go with any of the three, from what Joe just said, we're coming back on January 31st.
Right. And with option one, it's primarily because staff won't have enough time to finalize. Okay. Because we're not just choosing a map, but we also have a redistricting plan.
The plan, yeah.
According to charter that they've done a draft of, but until they know which map, the staff doesn't know which. Any other questions for Joe? Joe, so if we made significant tweaks and decided to go 30 days after the 24th of January, where does that put us? Is that February 24th? Or what is 30 days from January 24th?
Yeah, basically that would give us, go 30 days out from the 24th meeting. So we're looking in February, yes. And part of the discussion that we had earlier was what sort of deadlines does that impact on the city side? Because we've been trying to hit a deadline of getting this process done by February 1st. And the reason for that is because that is the beginning of the process where the city council candidates can start running and fundraising for office. So how do they know what district to fundraise for if they don't know what district they're running in? And so when we look at that as a deadline, that's not a real deadline. Our real deadline in the city's charter says this process needs to be done 151 days before the election. Election, I believe, is November 8th. I do know that whatever the 151-day point is our real deadline to finish this process is June 10th, 2022 is when we should have final maps adopted. And so in reality, if we're going to make whatever we consider, a material change or a substantive change or something like that, such that the commission would like to republish this for another 30 days and receive public input, we certainly have plenty of time to do that. It just, would push the process into February.
Before our January 24th meeting or at the January 24th meeting, can you nail down if we went 30 days, what the February date would be? Do we count Tuesday the 24th of January? Do we start on the 25th? How do you start counting 30 days? Because you're going to have to, there's 31 days in January. Is it
I'm sorry if that was a question for you.
Is it February 24th or is it?
Well, I would think the 23rd, but no.
You think it's 23rd?
Yeah.
Okay. So Joe, if you can give us an exact date, if we do go 30 days, what that date will be?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
So if on Monday of this next week, if you can tell us exactly in February when 30 days from January 24th. Thank you. And we're still on 6.3, correct? Okay. Any other commissioner questions or comments? Okay, we'll open it up to public comment regarding the schedule for upcoming meetings, item 6.3.
Hi, Pete Constant again. Just 3 points. One, I urge you not to change the process. The process was mailed to every resident. It was emailed to every resident. It was written about. So changing the process and going into variations and making material changes, I think, causes a problem because you will have to go the additional 30 days because there will invariably be people who are impacted who want to make comments. And I think when you made the decision to interpret the charter to mean a draft plan can have multiple maps instead of a map, you kind of limited yourself to the 6 here. If it was one map, you would probably have done a lot of adjustments and analysis along the way because it would have been more feasible. So I just think that it's problematic if you change it and you don't publish it and go through the process of getting some more public input. I know it's never wise to argue with an attorney, especially someone I respect like Joe, but I disagree on the fact that you would not have to go through the 30-day period. It's true that our charter is silent and there is an area of the election code that is different, but typically when you have an enabling action in your charter that is more restrictive, in this case, more time is more restrictive than what is in state law, the 30-day period, you have to follow the tighter restrictions that are in the charter language. And then lastly, the February 1st date is an artificial deadline. I can tell you as an elected office holder myself on a school board, a former city council member, a candidate for offices, someone who's assisted candidates of offices, I would not consider at all a candidate's impact on what you do for drawing maps. In fact, our charter sort of refers to that in the drawing of the lines, but overall, whether they make a decision or not to run, I think is irrelevant to the time that you choose to carry out your charge. We've seen that with the congressional districts, with the state assembly and senate districts. People have been out running for office. There's nothing that prevents them from starting their infrastructure, doing what they need to do to prepare themselves to run for office. So please don't inconvenience the residents for future potential candidates who want to run for office. I think that's a bad precedent, and it's exactly why the charter, this charter section was written to keep political interest out of it. So I just plead with you. Of all the other stuff, that's the most important. Keep the political interest of who runs for what when out of the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. Public comment on item 6.3.
Yeah, hi, Jay Reed again. Yeah, your process is your backbone of what you've been moving forward with these maps. I think trying to change it midstream is not really recommended or a good idea. I think what this commission really needs to grapple with, maybe with Joe's help, is what are you going to define a small change as versus a bigger change as? Is it 100 houses? Is it something larger than that? And I think that what this commission ought to consider is defining that tonight. And so it's agendized, so you actually have it for discussion on Monday. So we're not wheelie-nealing it about what's a substantial change versus a minor tweak. I think, moving a line a little bit to incorporate, 100 houses is a minor tweak. But changing an entire line to include a neighborhood association, well, that's a major tweak, at least to me. So I think like getting a definition for this commission to define what is a tweak versus a substantial change, absolutely you guys should consider it, and it absolutely, in my opinion, should be agendized for discussion on Monday. Thanks.
Public comment regarding 6.3? Hi, how are you?
Hi, my name is Scott Huber. I serve with Pete on the Roseville Joint Union High School District. And first, I want to say thank you for your service as in this process. It has given many of you a glimpse of what public service is all about, along with many of the difficulties that come along with it. But you get to see joy along the way. I will echo some of the comments about not changing necessarily the process. And if you'll indulge me for just a moment, I think you've got 6 maps. I think you need to narrow them down. And I apologize, Mr. Chair, that I came in a few minutes late. I was unavoidably detained. I couldn't get here on time. But I think you need to narrow it down. And I think you've got to take a look at what are your 2 or 3 best maps. And if map B is not one of them, I think that's simply a mistake in my opinion. And it is the most compact. It keeps communities together. But I think you've got to narrow this process down. And you simply have, I will just say, you have too many maps. You have too many options on the table. So I think at this point you need to start narrowing these things down into what are some of your most important components, what are some of the most important things you want to see in those maps. Start narrowing them down. And again, I appreciate the latitude, Mr. Frank, you've given me in saying, I think map B has to be one of them. But I think you need to start narrowing them down, or to put it a different way, you've got to eliminate some of them. Thank you.
Thank you. State your name for the record, please.
Good evening, Lisa Larkin. Good evening, commissioners. I just wanted to comment that I believe that they had the demographer on at either the last or the meeting before that. I can't remember. I've been to so many of them. That said that any change to a map would be a new map. So I don't think you have to really identify a small tweak versus a large tweak. She came on the screen and said that any change would be a new map. So I do think that you should consider that. There are neighborhoods, here we are in District 5 right now, area, but there are neighborhoods on map B that are being divided that were ignored last time as well. So you've got Caseburg, Kingswood, and you've got historic Sierra Vista that are divided. They're not where they belong. They are not with their community of interest. And that needs to be fixed. And so it doesn't really matter if it's a small tweak or a big tweak. Make the change. They've already identified we have plenty of time. All those candidates that are going to be running for office, so they're all equally disadvantaged with fundraising for an extra month. Big deal. This is 10 years of Roseville that we need to fix. We need to try to keep those communities together where they belong. And so looking at those maps, I agree you should narrow them down, maybe pick 3 or even 2, but make changes to those maps that meet with all of the public comments. Consider those areas that got ignored last time and let them have a say. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment on item 6.3? Father, would you like to say anything? And by the way, thank you very much for allowing us to use your facility. Oh, I didn't think it was going to actually...
Hello, I'm Father Cliff Hagen-Jost. I'm the pastor here, the rector, as we call in the Episcopal Church of St. John's. And I just want to offer my encouragement to all of you, or my thanks, really, for this very difficult task. I also am a member of the City of Roseville Planning Commission. I'm one of the commissioners, and I know what a difficult task it is to take in all the information and listen to every person who offers an opinion about an issue that comes before a body such as this. And I'm hopeful, and I encourage all of you, that as difficult as that is, to refrain from finally making judgments until you have really listened to everyone, and then you can make up your minds about what you should do. But as a commissioner, that's what I try to do on the Planning Commission, is to not prejudge, to listen to every comment that happens, and to take all that information in before rendering a decision. And I hope that you'll do the same. I want to say thank you to all of the public who have come tonight, and I want you to know that the people of St. John's are committed to continuing to serve our community whenever the opportunity arises. So thank you all for being here, and mi casa es su casa. And if you didn't know, and I don't know if we made an announcement, the bathrooms are right out there on the left side. So thank you all, and we're happy to have hosted you.
Thank you, Father Cliff, and again, thank you for letting us use the facility here. Let's see, we are on public comment. Is there anybody else in the public who'd like to speak on item 6.3? Seeing none, I will close public comment, and as is tradition for these public hearings, we will have commissioners, if they'd like, kind of a round table. One of the interesting things about these meetings that I found is that we all want to hear from you, but you all want to hear from us. And again, we're absorbing everything that everybody's saying, but I think it's responsible for us to at least give you all an idea of, not necessarily how we're going to vote or things like that, but just anything that might be on our minds. Is there any commissioner who'd like to go first? If at all? Holly, okay.
Hi, I'm Holly, and it's been very, very helpful to be out in the community, doing hearing what everybody has to say, because I think when, at least from my perspective, when we were first making the initial decision about the maps that we were going to pick, it was following the police charter, right? And then the maps. We started with 23 public maps that were drawn, and I personally didn't know who drew the maps. The ones that I have. But yes, it's been very helpful to hear from the community. I've learned a ton of things that I wouldn't have thought about before. So I appreciate it.
Any other commissioners and alternate commissioners? This includes you as well, if you'd like to make any comments at this point.
I'll echo Holly's comments. The public hearings have been tremendously helpful. All the input and what's been submitted online. I've been thank you. I've been printing it out, looking at it, reading it, and it's been very, very helpful, I think, for all of us to hear what each district has to say and what's important to them.
It's hard to hear.
We didn't know yet, when we picked those 6 maps, what we didn't know yet. And so the public testimony has been absolutely essential and extremely helpful. I just want to echo that. But yeah, and I said that Tuesday, and I still feel that way. I'm preparing to be a sponge and sort of go over it and sort of through what we did before I go figure out, try to get some kind of a start of what I think we need to do specifically. The public comment has been really important, definitely.
Other commissioners?
Well, I will say that I'm really glad that we've had the public out, and each of the meetings have been well attended, much better than I expected, and I'm glad to see that. And I also think it was incumbent, from my perspective, to not say what I think, but to take in what the public wants to tell us before we really make a decision. And I want to thank you all for being here. It's unfortunate because I couldn't hear a thing up and down this table, but I could hear everyone out there perfectly, and that was the important part for me. So again, thank you to all of you, not only for tonight, but some faces I feel like we're ready to have dinner together. So thank you all, I appreciate it, and look forward to finishing up this work for you guys.
All right, if you don't mind, a couple things. I have a question for either staff or other commissioners or even a member of the public regarding the language in the charter on rail yards. And if staff or other commissioners or a member of the public can help us look at where does the rail yard start and end, because it's really hard to see on a map. Anybody have a phone that can look at it, Pete? I'm sure if you look at the rail yard.
Yeah, Pete Constant again. I don't have a photo to show you, but I've taken the time to drive around it and try and really understand those neighborhoods. And I think for me, when I look at it, I really look for the impermeability portion. So, you know, we heard from several people about how their neighborhoods work together, how their children do things together. And Paul, you may remember when I brought this up during the charter review, it was really about that impermeability. You can't get there. If you can't get to your neighbor, how can you treat them like a neighbor? And it's one thing when you look at a freeway and you have overcrossings and undercrossings and you have several ways to get across. But as you know, it's very difficult to get across a railroad track, but even more difficult to get across a rail yard. And in this case, I don't remember the number, but it's well over 800 acres. It's this huge impenetrable barrier. So what I did is I drove up one side and looked, okay, can you get to the neighborhood? Really, the only way you can sort of off of Kirby going over, you know, Foothill and over the bridge, but that takes you past the neighborhood. So you can't even really get to the neighborhood there. Really, the only place you can do it is up towards the top. And if you look at, I believe it is map, sorry, I think it's map D, but let me see here. No. If you look at, sorry, I got all my maps mixed up here. One of them, so map C, if you look, that one has a little bit on each side just at the top, but there's ways to get around there, and those areas are fairly similar. If you look at, there's one other one that I mentioned in my comments. And of course I can't find it now. There's one other that,
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you mentioned C.
Yeah, let me see here. Yeah, so E does the same, but kind of the opposite direction. So it keeps most of the neighborhoods to the, as you're looking at it, the bottom left, but it keeps the sort of the historic area right around where the rail yard ends around Washington Street in that area. So you can actually get back and forth between those neighborhoods. So when I look at that, I don't see those areas as being separated. But when I look at all those other maps and you see that you literally cannot get from here to there. You can see it, but you can't get to it. And that is a separation, and that's what I was contemplating when I brought this up at the redistricting, or the Charter Review Commission, and asked for that language to be put in. I don't know if that's helpful, Mr. Frank, but that's kind of my thought process behind it.
Very much. And again, this language on my next question isn't in the charter. Rail yards are. But if you look at, and again, I don't want to, you don't have to answer, but I want to. The industrial area, one north and south is called the industrial area east. In your view, does that divide one side of the city or one side of the district from another?
Not per the language of the charter. I mean, you could make that argument, much like the old maps in District 1 where it narrows down to Eureka Boulevard at 80 and then opens back up and there's no neighborhoods that are connected. You could make that argument as well. It just isn't as specific as it is in the city charter. And I see our chair from the Charter Review Commission here. She probably has some comments as well.
do you have some perspective in terms of kind of a rail yard language and whether you can cross it?
I have a recommendation to you. I'm Susan Rohan, and as he mentioned, I was chair of the Charter Review, and there's a number of people here tonight who also served on Charter Review. I think it would be a very good idea for you to ask staff to have the planning department and the city attorney's office prepare some very neutral information for you regarding that question that may be of use to you as you use your deliberations, so that perhaps there isn't as much interpretation.
So if any commissioners want more geographic information, you can ask staff for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know I've been using like Google Maps and things like that, and just driving the neighborhoods, and that tells us something, not everything.
Now, you want us to say, I would like that information.
Would you like to request staff
I would like to
information? Do you
request.
want to, like specifically which information?
I would like to see like the rail yards and the impact.
Can we speak up, please?
I would like to see the rail yards and the impact from that.
She would like to know any impact on any particular map that the rail yards would have.
Just kind of more based on, I think, what Pete was saying and Susan Rohan was saying. Just to kind of see, we have some maps here, that doesn't look like it divides it. We have some that do, so maybe just a little bit of a comparison.
So maybe legal and functional.
Maybe functional is better. Functional.
Okay. If staff can come back with whether it's maps or testimony from staff, the consequences of any of these maps regarding the railroad, functionally, how far somebody has to drive to get to one side of the district and another that is partially divided by the Charter what?
Doesn't say, right? It says that should be a rail yard is not state principle, not street, right? It might be helpful to cover the law first, take the rail yard and maybe overlay them on the maps.
Yeah, that would be
Okay. So, demographer is Joe A out there?
Yeah.
Well, not right now, but by the January 24th meeting. Julia?
And can we also identify the streets that, because if we're going to put the rail yard on there, whatever streets would be the route to kind of get around?
Commissioner Sweeney is saying also add the streets, and I think that was something that a member of the public had asked for at another meeting, because it's hard to see the street names on these maps.
Yeah.
And so if you are driving around, it's hard to know what things actually look like. So if the demographer, I don't know if it's Michelle or Helen or Joe, can ask the or Brian can ask the demographer on Monday. They can have that information.
Oh, so I'm just saying specifically with the rail yard, so I think one of the good points was, how does a neighbor get to the other side of the rail yard? So if we could have emphasis on the routes around the rail yard, if that was the intent of the Charter Review Committee.
All right, so some information, some feedback from staff regarding the rail yard, including roads nearby. All right. And again, I apologize, but if you'll indulge me, I do have a couple other questions and comments. I do want to clarify that at previous meetings, the commission, I don't want to speak on anybody's behalf, agreed that February 1st fundraising deadline really doesn't matter to us. If it does, it's way at the bottom, but I don't even think it does. And so just to make that clear for everybody, at least not on my mind. There was a comment by Joe about a long meeting on the 24th, and I don't want that to scare anybody from coming to the meeting or participating in the meeting. We've joked about bringing sleeping bags and things like that. not going to be naive and say that it's going to go quickly, but long meetings aren't necessarily bad. It just means we have a lot to discuss, and we do have a lot. Even if there was no public comment and no questions, we still have a lot of things to go through. And so we encourage public comment, we encourage questions, and so yeah, it might go long, but that's okay. Don't what's that? There's a suggestion to have some breaks during the meeting, which please remind me, and I will. And then again, there was a comment tonight and at another public meeting about something that happened 10 years ago. That we don't want to do what happened 10 years ago. I just want to remind everybody, this is the first time we're dealing with redistricting. 10 years ago, we had at-large city council, so there weren't districts. And so this is all new for all of us. And like Michelle suggested, we'll come back and our city attorney will come back and make some suggestions on how to improve the charter, how to improve this process. I really appreciated this process and learning, what we can do and what we can't do. And so I think that's all I have. Any other commissioners have any comments? Julia?
I just want to give credit where credit is due. I think someone said earlier that I came up with that community of interest form, and that was all the beautiful marketing of City of Roseville. I did not make that, and so I just want to acknowledge all the good work that the team supporting our commission has done, making those community of interest forms, making the signs, publicizing everything so we get people here. It makes our job so much easier because they are putting out such good material to get your input. So I wanted to give credit where credit was due, that was definitely the city's supports for us.
Also real quick, we do have great staff that's been helping us immensely on this process, but this isn't all they do, and they're not at our beck and call for everything that we might want. And so, for example, when we ask or when we suggest any changes to a map, it's not immediately going to be on the website. It's not going to immediately be printed out for us. And just for full disclosure, I did submit some changes to map C that will likely be relatively significant and required 30 days afterwards, that I printed out for commissioners, and I think that circulated, but my printer did not have enough ink for me to print out for the public. Anybody would like to, either for me to discuss them or to talk privately, we will certainly have that information available on Monday.
One more comment, information. I would hope that on Monday, that if you edit maps, which I'm sure you will, that we can take a break and print them, that you'll have a connection so that we can actually look at them, because they're up on the screen, that's fine, but then something else is on the screen, and that would be really nice.
We will ask staff if that's a capability that they have to print. Ryan? His question was, when we're making changes to any maps, is there any way to print them at the time and provide them to the public?
If the demographer is able to email them to us, then we can, but he's doing that remotely, so we don't have any access to his computer or maps live. So he would have to send us a PDF of that, and we would be able to do that, but it would take a little bit of time for us to do that.
Maybe we take a picture of our phone.
Possibly, yeah. I did have one comment about the audio tonight. I know it was difficult to hear in some areas of the room. We do have an audio recording we'll have it on our YouTube channel in the morning and on our website in the morning. So if anybody wanted to re-listen to the meeting, if they feel like they might have missed a question or an answer, that'll be available tomorrow morning.
Thank you. And just one last thing, again, reiterating or piggybacking on what people said about thanking the public for coming out. And just a reminder that districts don't require the city council member to stay in their district. The expectation, I think, of this commission is that city council members do represent the entire city, and they might get feedback from residents in their district, but they're also getting feedback from residents in other districts, and ultimately have to make a decision that benefits the entire city of Roseville. And so even though some people may like districts or not like districts, I think the culture in Roseville is such, and hopefully we can build that culture now, that future city council members really will continue to represent the entire city. And so with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much.